Ani bonjour, and welcome to Anishinaabe Word Parts. Join myself, Rochelle, and Dené while we work on improving our understanding of an important aspect of Anishinaabe and discuss our experiences as Anishinaabe learners, users, and teachers.
This is a learning journey, a starting place for further exploration. Do not mistake our enthusiasm for any kind of authority. We have learned from amazing speakers, but we make mistakes and misunderstand things.
Always check in with speakers and learners in your area to find the words and word parts that work best for you. Nahau, Bajtada. Ani Kianwea Mikwech Bijayek. Rochelle Ndijnikas. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Rochelle, and I am here with my friend Dené. How are you doing today, Dené?
Yeah. Anyway, kiko na mino Fosho kina nin pindage gijugo kwe indishne kanago gigu ndo dame. Gege neji kendam. Wamanon. Gineka Rochelle. Bonjour.
Bonjour. Bonjour. So today we're going to continue our discussion of initials, and those are the things that come in the first part of the word. I did want to mention something I forgot last episode. I wanted to mention that not all Anishinaabe words use this pieces system. We do have words that are just short little words, and they don't have what we call morphemes or parts that carry meaning. They just are what they are. So we're specifically looking at the ones that do. And I just wanted to make sure, in case anybody needed to hear it, not every word can you take apart and look for meaning in this way. So I should have mentioned that in our first discussion of initials, but I'm telling you now. Having said that, we're going to continue to talk about that first little piece, the initial. And we brought a new part to discuss today. What part are we going to talk about today?
I really appreciated our discussion about initials and your explanation because we can see, as we're learning, there's all these words that kind of have little parts that kind of look the same. And you get to a point when you think, I wonder if those words are related. If only I knew. And so hopefully this will at least get you thinking about that and good reminders from Rochelle that it doesn't always work this way, but we enjoy when it does and it helps us to build our vocabulary. So the one that we're talking about is probably one that almost everybody knows or has learned at some point in their journey. And it's describing things in a simplified way as good. And that's the initial is mino, with a O, or Minw with a W. And we see it written in a few different ways. So we're going to talk about why is it in two different ways? How are those related? Why does one dictionary have it as mino? Some have it min W, some have it just as min. And I don't know that we know all the answers as per usual. We have lots of questions, but this is going to be a fun discussion.
A learner's take. Yeah, so minwa is an initial and can come at the front of a word. It also can be a preverb, and we're not going to talk about that today, but that just means sometimes it comes before the word. And I'm hoping one day we'll get someone who knows better to come and talk to us about why they sometimes make that jump in and then out of the word. But when it is an initial, when it's the first part of the word, it can be any type of verb. So it could be a verb that you do to someone, it can be a verb that you're just doing, it can be weather related or sounds of things that just are in the universe. We're not even doing it, it's just the way it is. And so all of these different types of verbs. And I don't know if we talked about this in our last discussion, but we'll start using some what we call linguistics lingo. So those verbs have little acronyms. So we call them VIIs. Those are the ones that just exist in the world. VAIs, the ones we do, but we're not really doing it to anything. The ones we do to something, those are called VTIs. And the ones we do to other people, we call them VTAs. And we're not going to use that vocabulary too much, but sometimes we slip. So we wanted to make sure that people at least had a reference point when we start saying random letters, it does mean something to us. And a lot of us have learned those acronyms and learned how to divide up verbs using those letters. So I wanted to also share that with people. I know that sometimes that lingo can be confusing, but sometimes it's helpful. So we thought we'd share it. So minnow can come at the beginning of a word and can be any of those types of verbs. We talked about before that initials can be descriptors in a way. So what is your understanding of this minnow as a descriptor in language?
Yeah, this was a big my vote was to do Minnow for this podcast, for this episode, because I actually like it starts out so simple and think it's so simple. And there was a time when I really knew not much and it seemed really easy. And I feel like the more that I learn, the more complicated it feels. And so it's one of those word parts that I would say I'm making friends with Minnow. I'm doing my best. I'm working on our relationship, but there's moments and I have questions and there's moments when I think I know something and then it turns out I don't know anything. So I'm really looking forward to having that conversation and then really just expressing the idea of even this English idea of good. And when we use good in all this set of diverse and interesting different ways, what are we talking about? So what I did was I took a little deep dive in preparation for this because it made me think if I want to use minno and I want it to mean good, I went and I looked up this word part in first I started in the English dictionary. So I went in the English dictionary and I was like, how complicated can it be to define good? Well, it turns out there's 36 different entries and different uses for good just as an adjective. And so we're going to talk about some of those, but I also wanted to touch on the fact that I looked them up in the Anishinaabemowin's dictionaries, the multiple ones, Algonquin language dictionaries, and found some really interesting entries. So one was, of course, our friend the Ojibwe People's Dictionary. They just kept it really simple, and they just said, this word part means good. Mino equals good. That's it. And I was like, great, how easy, how clear. I cannot be led astray. And then I knew that. That's so easy. And then I went and looked up in Freelang or the Test Dictionary, whichever one of those versions you like to use. And it has minot equals nice, good, fine, or well. Okay. All right, I'm still down with this. I'm all right. I haven't been led astray. Then I went and I looked up our friend, the Anishinaabemowin, the Red Dictionary, the really great one out in Rochelle's area to see what that one says, because there's a lot of really cool definitions and gives good insight in that dictionary. And it said good, favorable, nice, and then it said intensifier good. And Rochelle, I want to talk
Okay.
about that.
That's interesting. In English, there's so many uses of good. I think as English speakers, we kind of think, we got this. We know what this word means. But then there are so many other options and so many different ways that other people might use it in English that's slightly different than how we would. So, one other thing before we go too far into all these different aspects, you mentioned about the sound changes, which is something that happens in Anishinaabe quite a bit for different reasons. So, what we're talking about today is specifically this one sound change. Do not try to apply it to every other sound change that happens in the language, because hopefully we'll cover them later on. But the sound for O and the sound for W are quite similar. Sometimes we think there's like a hard line between them because we write them differently. But I think with the O and the W, it's a little bit more flexible. I know that I've seen places where there are things that I would write as an O, and other places will write it as a W. So we have to let go of our love of very strict rules. But having said that, for Minnow, I think there's like a little bit of a guideline. And so the way I think about it is if the next part, so we have our initial, MIN, and then if the next part starts with a consonant, then we'll see an O, Mino. The exception to that is if it's a W, because then we don't have it at all because two W's beside each other wouldn't work too well. But generally for consonants, it's an O. And then if we have a vowel after it, an A or an E, I don't know of that many examples where there's an I afterwards. So I can't speak definitely on every option that exists, but generally if there's an A or an E, a vowel, then it's going to look like a W. And for some speakers, they'll kind of just drop it. The W is weaker and you might not hear it at all. So it won't be represented in the word when you see it written. That's my understanding. Is that kind of where you see that kind of OW differentiation after the MIN?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good to see some examples. And so remembering that in Anishinaabe, we as English speakers sometimes get a bit hung up on the English idea of what a W would sound or an English idea of what an O will sound. We're always told by our teachers and great fluent speakers that the sound will come close to that, but it is not necessarily the same. So we encourage you to listen to speakers in your community and how they say these words, because they're definitely, we found, even just from Rochelle and I talking about some of these words, there's some differentiation in how we hear it, and not just where we live, but in other places and other places we've visited and other areas. So for that starting with a consonant, some of the examples would be minose, minose. And so you can really hear the O in there because the next letter after the mino and then se is se is the final there. So minose, it's going well, or she's doing well, or things are going well. And then another one minotagoze. So the T is the consonant, tagoze is that's what comes after the mino. And so minotagoze, you really can hear that O in there as that connector. So yeah, that makes sense about the consonants. And then the other ones that you pointed out there was W is the only exclusion to that. So minwewe, minwewe juan, minwewe. There's all kinds of minwewe yanamud. There's all kinds of things that can sound good. And then everything just collapses into a W.
So if we didn't have a consonant, we had a vowel. I apologize for my pronunciation. You can email us your complaints. So, abum, seeing things. So I'd say, Gemin wabaminagos. You're looking good. But, some people might not hit that W as hard. Minaba minagos, I think they might say. Do you pronounce it?
Yeah, over here in this region, it certainly I think depends on community, maybe it depends on where they've learned and how. So some of the speakers I work with for sure do not say a W almost ever. And it's, if anything, it's really just sort of a rounding of whatever vowel sound is beside there. Menendum is a really good example. Menendum. I don't hear a W in there. I know that it's in there, but I definitely don't hear it from certain speakers. But there are others that are full on Minwe and done, Minwe and dum. Like that you can actually hear it. So it's the same, and just another opportunity for us as learners to really be conscious about the way that we're sounding, trying not to sound like we're super Minwe and dum Englishy. Let's not do that, but to emulate the sound of speakers or recordings from people from our community. And I think it's those W's are just one of those real differentiators when we talk about regional variations in sound. I think W's are a big part of that. I love talking about O's and W's. We were fortunate to take classes from Brendan Kishketon, who used to be at the University of Minnesota. He would always say that it's W's during the week and O's on the weekend, that there, or was it the other way around? Maybe O's during the week, W's on the weekend. I don't know, but that they're obviously very related sounds.
This is one of those instances where I have to say, "Hi, learners. Do as I say, not as I do." So you'll hear me screw it up a lot, but I'm trying real hard. So please Do better than me.
We'll apologize in advance for all of our pronunciation as per usual. There's everyone just
Mhm,
remember that. We're all kind to each other and we're all trying our best. But
mhm.
that's a great those are great examples and I do think about just being conscious in our sounds and as much as recording yourself is really painful and listening back, you start to hear some of those things and W's is a great thing to listen for. W's and O's, great thing to listen for as learners. I was going to say like let's get into our deep dive about what does good even mean? Maybe by the end of this we won't even know anymore. I'm not sure. That's how I feel. So I would like to bring you along with me.
Let's
Okay.
go.
Okay. Okay, so when I started to think about all the different ways that we use good in English or Anishinaabe, and this is the same, but it has different meanings and connotations and inferences and things like that. So the first one I want to talk about is when we're seeing something and judging it in some kind of way. So making a judgment call, determining that something is good, it is or it's nice or that it looked good in some kind of way. So I am making the judgment call. So some great examples about this that I really enjoyed was you have a nice car. You have a nice car. I like your car. I don't know if I'm talking about it being expensive or fancy or anything like that, but mino da ba ne. Mino da ba ne. You have a nice car.
Yeah, because I can think of examples where I would say that to someone and maybe it's not the most expensive car. That nice could be applied to a whole bunch of different
Yeah,
characteristics.
like maybe it has those fancy
Mhm.
eyelashes on the front headlights, and then I'd be like, "Gimino da ba ne, Rochelle."
Or like when kids, any car that's blue is like that's the one they like, so just any blue
Any blue
car.
car or like punch buggies back when we were kids. Those were all nice cars. Yeah. Overall.
Yeah.
So she has a nice car for sure. And then one with the sound change, I'd like to do a good one that this one's really useful because we, as learners, we're trying to make conversation and we go to movies or we watch TV. Minwa te se. Minwa te se. You told me you went to a movie last night. I'd say, oh, gi minwa te se na. Minwa te se na. Was it a good movie? Was it a good movie?
Mhm.
Minwa te se.
And if Rotten Tomatoes has taught us anything, it's that people can have very different opinions about the same movie.
And what
So
makes
that
it
goes
good?
back to your judgment call.
And what would make it good? Does that mean it was funny? Does that mean like it was beautiful cinematography? Does that mean I really like the actor? Like all of those things, Minwate say.
Mhm.
You're making a judgment that it was good or nice, or you enjoyed it in some kind of manner. Any other ones there about
Okay.
judging something?
I don't know. I feel like now I'm considering my entire life and how judgy I am. So do you think like something like Minwagame would fit into that? Like a nice liquid?
Something as like tasting good or liking it in some way. We can talk about that next if you like. So, the idea of finding something pleasing, nice, or enjoyable, there's a couple ways you can do this here. So, if you like to do something, you think something is good or nice, and even what we talked about in the opening when you use minwendam, minwendan, yeah, Naminwendan Anishinaabe mo yan. Yeah, I like speaking Ojibwe. I like trying to speak the Anishinaabe language. Naminwendan, I like it. I put Minwagam in there because I think you're talking about something maybe that is a nice liquid because maybe you like it, the taste of it.
So this is like enjoying something maybe a little bit more than before when we were saying about, you know, you got a nice car. This is more like I enjoy that liquid.
I enjoy.
It's not all just good car, good liquid, good.
Yeah, and all these
Because
Minwei words are all really good examples of that.
Minwei is like can go with a whole bunch of stuff, but it has to do with sort of a nice sound. I don't know if you have a better definition for that.
Yeah, and finding it pleasant, I think, is another thing because I think I've heard these minwewe bisa, right? And the idea of like, oh, the rain is falling, and you just think that that just sounds so pleasant. It's kind of a judgment call, but you're really expressing the idea that it is pleasant.
Great. So So then what are some of the other ways we use this? Cuz I feel like my strategy for the first couple years of learning was not that helpful cuz I just tried to force good into all of these ways of thinking. So I was like, good, sound, leaf, wind, which I mean allow you know, gets you to the meaning, but I but not so much of the nuance. And so I think maybe that's what this exploration is helping me to do is let go of the literal piece and more get on board with the vibes.
Good vibes only. I wanna talk next about, like, how this and maybe this is close to judgment, right? Like, I think there's so much nuance in these, but it really makes me think having these thoughts in my brain, and maybe because I'm Fish Clan, but I really like to do a deep dive and think, "What am I trying to say?" Because another sort of category that I made for some of these words was making or determining an action to be positive, I think is how I define this. It's a bit confusing, but I'll give some examples. I was at a storytelling event last week, and this grandma told this hilarious story, and it was about her clan, and it was really funny. And I'm not going to talk about it in case you're listening to this not in the winter, but Minwa Jamo, Minwa Jamo. It was a good
Okay.
story. It was a positive story. It was funny. She was really good at telling it, like all of those things. So get Minwa Jamut. Yeah, like she told a real good story.
So that is interesting because often we don't think of minnow with our actions so much. We often go to some of these other pieces like the preverbs and nita. But are there other minnow actions that you think we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I think there's a couple then when you're telling stories that are positive or sharing, like having a positive, inflicting like positive news. I thought that was really interesting. Minowadodan. Minowadodan is like telling good news about something. So like maybe your team won the championship. Minowadodan. I really like that one. That one was really interesting to me because sometimes the news is not so positive, but we like to share good news with each other. And then also minwadise. Minwadise, like being a good person or but not necessarily that's not necessarily like angelic or anything, but just like, being if how you would mean in English, right? Like he's a good person. He lives positively, he lives honest and true. Minwadise.
There's also kind of a group of them that have to do with fun or like, I don't know, happiness maybe? Like minwape.
Yeah.
I was thinking like to laugh happily in
Joyously.
a good way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Good laughing.
there's a whole
I gotta let go of that.
Oh, I know. Good. All right. This is, we got on this whole, right? But the idea of behaving or acting in a happy or joyous manner, which
Mhm.
is like such a weird dictionary definition, but it really helps me think about these things. Minwape is a really good one. Like, when would I use minwape? What would have to happen? I'd have to be like, oh, that's like an auntie just like having a good time and slapping the person next to her. And oh my God, she's just like really enjoying it. It's not just a giggle. That is a Minwape, that's
Mhm.
a good one, yeah.
I was also thinking with minwape, it kinda differentiates it from, like, when you're laughing at someone or doing some not nice laughing.
Mean laughing
Um,
or something. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me think also because we
Um,
talked about Bosch last week, so Boschkape, right, when you, like, explode with laughter, but Binoape
mhm.
is a nice contrast to that and just thinking about the different ways that you potentially could wanna describe someone's laughing or you're laughing. So there's the last one here is the one that really confused me a little bit. And then when I look at the examples, I was like, this isn't confusing. And then I try to do it myself and it is confusing. So let's talk about the idea of describing a skill or some kind of action or doing something well. So you're doing something and you're good at it, essentially. So there's a couple examples that I want to talk about. Maybe we have some insights. The first one
Okay.
that was one of the first things that I learned the morpheme or the final word part for sleeping, which is guame, guame. And so I learned you can madwe guame, which is snoring, and you can bugure guame, which is farting in your sleep. There's all kinds of things you can do in your sleep, and I love Nishnabemon for being so descriptive. So of course you can minong guame. Minongguame or Minongguam, depending where you're from.
I don't know if it's something that we're skilled at,
Right.
but certainly it's something that can vary.
So some of the other examples, like doing
Mhm.
something well. So say you are braiding hair or braiding a strap on a bag or something. Minwa pake. Minwa
Okay.
pake. Apake is the braiding. Minwa pake
Mhm.
means she's braiding it well. She's braiding things
Well.
well. The braid looks really nice. Maybe it's all really even. Minwa pake. Okay, so
Mhm.
then I'm like, well, does that mean she's good at braiding or she's just braiding things well? I don't know. Or
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with, like, you know, sometimes you do something well, but if I do a nice braid, people should not extrapolate that I can do that all the time. Like,
one time only.
has to be very specific conditions. So maybe that's part of the story, differentiation between what I observe and what I know to be true. And don't write it down, everyone. We're just brainstorming.
But if you would like to do your PhD on this very topic, we would love to read your paper. So please send it to us. Because there's another example here that really messed me up. And the idea of talking about someone that has good eyesight. Good eyesight. This is one of those ones that sounds a little bit different where you're from. So it could be minabe, minwabe, minobe. However, if there's a W in there or not, but the idea of having good eyesight, minwabe.
Have you used it? Do you remember a time where it came up?
I have not, but part of what I enjoy doing when I'm learning some of these word parts and initials especially is to talk about the senses and how we can describe different ways of using our senses to do actions. And this minwobe is a part of one of the word games that I play. And I was sitting with some speakers and they were playing this game with us. And two of them kind of looked at that word and said, hmm, and if you work with speakers, you know that that means they don't like it, or maybe that it's not familiar to them, or maybe they just wouldn't use it. So minwabe. And then another one was like, oh yeah, of course, that's good eyesight. So inconclusive. I forgot there's one more use of this, which I really enjoyed. And of course, it totally makes sense when we think about good, but the idea of being comfortable, being nice or well fit. You had a really cool example for this one.
Yeah. So, "Mina'ami" is a word that I hadn't used, but a little while ago, I took my kids to the Battersea Museum in Toronto. And anytime I go anywhere, I try to find the words that we can use a lot and use them as much as possible in context. And so, "Mina'ami," I think it's to do with, so the "ami" is kind of about stepping or walking maybe. Um, and minnow is good, comfortably, sturdily. So the definitions in the dictionary are like you're comfortable in your shoes or you're steady walking. So we went to the museum and I was thinking we'd just look at all the exhibits and say, do you think you would be comfortable
Mhm.
walking? But they actually have a space in the museum where you can try on shoes. And they had very high heels and they had wooden shoes and all sorts of different type, which were mina-ami sometimes, but often not. So we had a little tally sheet, comfortable walking, not comfortable walking. It ended up about 50-50.
What a fun activity and, like, opportunity to really use all these descriptor initials in so many cool ways, and you can really that activity probably could use that "-ame" final and then just describe it in all kinds of different ways, like, I don't know, there's probably lots of really cool descriptor words. The other things about this, the idea of "mino" equaling nice or comfortable or well fit, clothes was a good one that I learned it with that. Another one was, minwabe, the idea of sitting comfortably, which is always like interesting if you're at a ceremony and you get stuck sitting on the hard wooden bench or something and you're like not comfortable, you might need that word. And then another one was I'm doing a jigsaw puzzle, right? So when you find that piece that just fits in there like perfectly, minosin. It fits perfectly. It
Oh,
just like clicks into place and it sits well. So that was a minosin and one of the places where I used these words about well fit.
very good. I don't think I was at all familiar with that as a Minnow.
Mhm.
Okay, very cool. It's so interesting how we take, you know, this has happened a couple times already, and we're only a few episodes in, but like taking something that we thought we knew and just thinking about it and playing with it a bit to one, confuse ourselves, but also to get to that next stage of understanding. I feel like as learners, it's an important practice to not just get comfortable with the first thing you learn.
To talk about something we thought we knew, turns out we don't know anything. So really happy that you came with us on this journey. As someone who learns in community in lots of community spaces, Minnow always comes up for me because we always like to say Giminotagos. Giminotagos. Yeah, Anishinaabe Moyen. You sound good when you speak Anishinaabe.
This has been Anishinaabe Moon Word Parts, written and produced by Dené and Rochelle.
A big miigwech to all the language teachers who have helped us along our learning journey. We hope we've represented the language well, and apologies to everyone for all the errors we made in this episode.
For every episode, we consult our favorite resources, Anishinaabe Online Dictionary, the Ojibwe People's Dictionary, Gukum's Language, and Anishinaabe Reference Grammar.
For more information about the podcast or resources used in this episode, check out our webpage and social media.
Graphic design by Christy Belcourt, artwork by Christy Belcourt and Norman Allen. Miigwech!
Miigwech!